It's quite possible that an Italian astronomer looked through this telescope at a star-filled sky 400 years ago and in the process saw things no human had seen before.
Observers such as Galileo and others started to observe and report things in the sky which were not in the old texts that had been the authority up to this point in time.
Dating from about 1630, the Italian-made telescope is the oldest outside of Europe. The first telescope had been invented only a few decades earlier, and in a portrait from 1636, created while he was still alive, Galileo himself is seen holding a similar instrument.
This telescope testifies to the very early days of the telescope when the instrument was revolutionizing the way we do science and the way we learn about the universe.
The Adler Planetarium has a vast array of such priceless artifacts that the public seldom, if ever, sees. The thousands of items are stored in a climate-controlled, secure space where Pedro Raposo is the curator and resident authority of the priceless trove. The very oldest item in the Adler collection is a work of art as well as an instrument of science.
This astrolabe was made in Baghdad around 1130-31.
Astrolabes are among the oldest astronomical instruments, first used more than 2,000 years ago. They calculate the position of celestial objects as well as make measurements on Earth. Adler's prized astrolabe is only 900 years old, but few are as elaborate, and only a person of great wealth could have owned this one.
We know from inscriptions on the back that it belonged to a sultan.
Like any museum, the Adler Planetarium has to be very selective about what items to put on permanent display, mostly because of, pardon the pun, space constraints. And one of the artifacts always on display takes up a lot of space. It's Chicago's own Dearborn telescope.
It was the largest and most sophisticated telescope at the time, in the mid-1860s.
Constructed in Massachusetts in 1862, the telescope was originally made for the University of Mississippi, but the Civil War prevented its delivery. That's when the nascent Chicago Astronomical Society, intent on raising the city's scientific profile, snapped it up and brought it to the old University of Chicago. It was later moved to the Dearborn Observatory at Northwestern University, and in 1930 it was among the first artifacts donated to the planetarium.
The instrument is still very representative of the 19th century race for large telescopes, and above all, and I think this is very important, the civic commitment to science and astronomy.
On a much, much smaller scale, this 300-year-old Adler artifact was made to be portable. It's fittingly called a pocket globe.
You could carry this around in your pocket and then show it to friends to show how you cared about astronomy and geography.
The pocket globe is a nesting doll of sorts. Open it up and there's a terrestrial globe. The lining of the leather covering shows the northern and southern constellations. And inside the globe is an armillary sphere, a depiction of the universe as it was thought to be in the early 1700s. But perhaps the most magnificent depiction of the known universe several centuries ago is brought to life in this orrery.
It actually reproduced the motions and the relative rates of motion of the different planets.
This orrery was made by British clockmaker Thomas Heath in 1740, at a time when only 6 planets were known in our solar system. But 41 years later, when astronomer William Herschel discovered Uranus, another craftsman updated the orrery to include the newly found planet. Orreries weren't just fanciful pieces of clockwork, though. They served to reinforce the growing knowledge of fact-based science.
These instruments are very important to convey the ideas of Isaac Newton, and also very important to convey ideas of the order of the universe.
The Adler's antique artifacts may be long out of date, but they serve to show the many steps that were required to reach our modern understanding of the cosmos. For Chicago Tonight, I'm Eddie Aruza.